Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm your host, Amber. My pronouns are she, her. You can find me at TikTok at Moonchild77. Jenny is muted at the moment. She is finishing feeding up her dogs at the moment, but she also goes by she, her pronouns, and you can find her on TikTok at translovingmama. So this evening, I've got it running on the ticker at the moment. This evening is about navigating the political theater in today's political cycle safely. And the reason why we want to talk about this is because there's a very big difference between if you're a part of the LGBT community, specifically the trans community, and what your safety is and how you protect yourself compared to people who consider themselves allies and advocates like Jenny and I. And part of that was because I was seeing a lot of my trans community come out and talk about it, how they were, there's, as we get closer and closer to the election, they're getting more and more pushback. And honestly, there's more discrimination popping up within their comment sections, within their posts on LinkedIn and in other places. And so I had a couple of them who were making comments about how they have been blocking people who consider themselves, they are supportive of a different party and a party that is not supportive of the trans community. And they felt like for their own mental safety, that was a bridge they could not cross, a firewall they need to create for their own safety. And I think everybody should be able to create whatever you need to feel safe. But Jenny and I, when we talked about it, we both felt like, and we've seen this on other posts from other allies who have talked about how they felt, honestly, that they were going to cut people off too. And Jenny had found like this one particular post one day and she commented on it. And I saw right after she commented on it and followed up behind it that we both were talking about, had we done that, had we, like, even within our own families, if we cut people off who didn't feel the same way about our children as we did, we didn't give them the space to learn and to be educated and to grow and to honestly come forward and then be able to continue having that relationship, correct? Right? Like, I mean, that was, and we both come from conservative families. We both have very Republican conservative upbringings. So that is something that we as moms had to like figure out, how are we going to navigate this with our own families? And so for myself, I told my parents. And my stepdad was very receptive, very open. What name, what preferred pronouns? While my mother was very quick to say no. It took my mother over a year. But if I hadn't given her that space, she wouldn't be where she is today. She left a certain political party. She is not voting for certain politicians who are against my child because what happens to her grandchild is important to her. And that's kind of what Jenny and I wanted to speak about tonight, that, you know, if you need to for your own mental health, it is perfectly okay, right? And even us, like if we have somebody who comes back and they push back and they start getting discriminatory or bigoted, no, I'm blocking you. I'm done.
Bye.
Right? But as long as you stay open to it, we want to be able to have that conversation because we're not going to change people's minds if we keep shutting the door in their face. We have to be willing to talk across the aisle. So Jenny, I'm gonna let you pick up from there.
Yeah, sorry. I did have to feed my dogs, and I have a dog who has pancreatitis. She gets these flare-ups all the time, so she has to only have cooked noodles to eat. That is all the dog eats. She does not eat any protein, any crude fat. She can't have any of it. And so I'm cleaning my house all day, and all of a sudden it occurs to me my dog doesn't have any noodles. So I had to run to the store. Listen, this is the life I live. But along the lines of what Amber was saying, there are some people, and I recognize this, and I want to honor and understand, and support the fact that some people have people in their lives who you just know, like they're instantly toxic. They are a little more die-hard, um, cultish about this political party, and they're not very open, and they might be extremely religious or something like that. In that case, hey, nobody is saying, oh, this is your family, these are your parents, you have to love them. You don't have to love anybody, you don't have to accept anybody, you don't have to forgive anybody. But my circumstance was that I knew I had these parents that loved their grandchild, And I knew that they were very used to me being very left and being very this way. And they had always loved and accepted me. They would definitely, have something to say here and there about, about who I am, how I am, I'm a bleeding heart, this and whatever. But I knew that there was some safety there. I knew that I could broach that subject. I knew it wasn't going to be fun, and it wasn't, and it had some difficulty. There's still some with my own dad, but in just doing that and trying to stay open to it, they are neither of my parents are voting on that side of the aisle this year. Now, what will they do? Will they not vote at all? Will they do independent? I do not know, but I feel like that is great progress, all things considered. And I think that that's possible with a lot of people. The only person who's really going to know is you, what
Yeah.
is right for you. But if we can kind of approach in that way, or if, I've had people ask me before, like, Jenni, how did you talk to your parents about it? What are some things you said? I think Amber and I do have some good suggestions, or we can find them that might help to open up that conversation. I'm not saying you're going to be able to change anybody's mind or change anybody's vote, but the more people are exposed and the more people have someone in their life who is willing to be gentle with them. I know we don't want to be gentle with bigots. We don't want to be gentle with people who are harmful. And I'm a very reactive person. I'm a very, and I'm a hothead, but I'm also a very compassionate person. And I had to understand that these people are coming to this with their own past, their own experiences, their own deeply held beliefs, and their own conditioning, their own
Yep.
brainwashing. And nothing is going to overnight just fix everything. But I think that we're in a precarious position when we don't allow for that. When we just come at it so hot. Sorry, I have dogs. When we come at it too hot, people close off. And that's not what we're trying to do. That's not how anything is going to get better.
Mute while her dogs are barking. But and that is the truth of it. Like that's kind of, I think our second show, really our launch, our very first launch. We had some people who honestly we thought were supportive of the community, who were honestly they were connections of mine that I've been connected to for quite a while, who had worked with trans people. And they made a series of comments during our very first show that did not come off supportive, that came off honestly really poorly. And that week I had to sit with, do I delete this person? Do I allow them back in the space? What do I do with this? And I could tell very immediately after the show, Jenni was upset. And she had every right to be because the comments that they had made. And then honestly, when I expressed to Jenni that this person had been working with someone in the trans community for like 4 or 5 months, and they still were acting and speaking that way about the trans community, we both were kind of like, this isn't okay. And I removed them as a connection. I did not block them. And I told people, because I actually had people within the same circles who were like, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, they're not blocked. They can come back in and learn. They can come back and listen anytime they want to and be educated. But I'm not going to allow somebody to come in and put that kind of rhetoric out there that then chases away people who may not feel safe anymore because that person is in the comment section. And we wanted a safe space. We wanted a safe space where parents and allies and advocates who had questions or who wanted to come in and share their experiences, we wanted a place that they could come, that they felt safe to do that. And if you have someone who is being intolerant in the comment section or within an audio room space in my audio room, then that makes it changes the dynamic completely. And so with that person, again, we removed them. And I was just like, again, but the next episode, the second episode of this series of TransParents, we talked about it. You cannot meet intolerance with intolerance. It will not move the mission. It will not make acceptance any easier. In fact, people who believe that way, you're going to permanently cement their feet in that stance. You're going to push them further back than they were in the first place. And so, working with parents, and that's how we tried to explain it that night. I know sometimes that I work with parents who are very intolerant of their children. And to get them to acceptance, to get them to embrace their child, I have to move them to tolerance first. Then I can move them to acceptance and then embracing them. But sometimes it's baby steps because this is something so far out of their purview and so alien to them that they're extremely reactive. And so a lot of times you have to educate, you have to support them through it. And then honestly, it comes into this self awareness piece of getting the parent to realize that this isn't them and this isn't about them. This is about their child. And that's really hard sometimes for us to separate as parents. Like, we're like, oh, no, that's my kid. I raised them this way in the church and this political belief, and this is how we feel like in the family. So they think just like me. Do you think like your parents? I don't. Like, there were things that immediately out of my household, I was like, when I have kids, I am not doing that. And I'm not saying that, and I'm not acting that way because I'd already learned that what was detrimental to me would not be good for my children. And I think that's where Jenny and I come from as advocates. We want to be able to have this conversation piece. And we understand sometimes there are people you won't be able to talk to, that you will have to remove from your space.
Right.
But Jenny and I would rather step out and we'd rather have those conversations than somebody talk to our children. Because our children shouldn't have to, our sons shouldn't have to explain themselves. They shouldn't.
Right.
They should be able to live their lives the way they want to.
You know, Amber, recently I had and for anyone who may have seen my TikTok and is joining from there, welcome. We primarily stream live on LinkedIn, and it does push out to other channels, but that means that we can't follow every single comment. We are on an streaming service called StreamYard. We only get our LinkedIn feed of comments. So, you know, we try to address usually our comments on YouTube afterwards. And
Right.
as things progress, we can definitely work on that. But if you're here from that, welcome. Glad to have you. I did have a parent on TikTok who saw one of my recent videos, and she came to me and said, I'm also, hey, my kid just came out as trans. And she said, you know, I'm a liberal, but I'm not sure I believe my child, and I'm not sure, I just don't feel like this is their path. And so I think when we can understand that it's not just one side of the political aisle that we're talking to, even here within, and I've always considered myself a leftist, a Democrat, that kind of that side, right? I've always been on that side of that aisle, always. I was told I would grow out of it, and it turns out I have grown more into it. The more you realize things that go on, you're like, what are you talking about? How could I ever? Just for me. But you know, there's this idea that if you're already kind of on that side of the political spectrum, then you automatically accept and believe. And it just goes to show that we can say it in one breath, and then when it's our child, suddenly it's like, oh crap, like I got to put my money where my mouth is. That wasn't necessarily the case for me. One thing I love about me and you, Amber, is that we come to this with different background. I mean, similar, but different backgrounds, different experiences when it came to this. And so it gives us a lot of good leverage on perspective there. But you don't have to be on, you know, this far right side of anything to struggle with what happens whenever your kid comes out, and that you might yourself doubt this or not want this. And we understand. That's what we're trying to say is, regardless of where you are in that journey, we freaking get it, I promise, because there's a lot of range of feeling, emotion, experience that go along with us. But there is support, there is love, and our goal is always to support that human being, those human beings, and to make this world safer for them. And right now, as I kind of pointed out in another TikTok I did, we know that there are some states that are safer. One state, oh my God, is it Minnesota? That is codified. I don't know who thumbs down to me, but have a nice one. Has codified it into their constitution. Oh God, there go my dogs again. That's great. But until things are safe on a national level, they're not safe for every single state. And that's just
Right.
scary.
Well, I mean, it goes back to any of these.
No person in
It
our
goes
country should be unsafe in their own country.
right anywhere in the country. This shouldn't be like we hear the argument states' rights. I don't think it should vary state to state. when we're all in the same country and we're all we the people, for the people, by the people, I don't think my kid should be safe in one state and then unsafe in the next.
Right.
Jenni and I don't want our kids to go,
Right.
hey, let's go take a cross country trip with our friends and then have to worry and pull up a map of where is it safe for me to stop to go to the bathroom? Where is it safe to get a
Right.
hotel room? Where am I going to be accepted and where am I going to be arrested?
Right.
This it doesn't make any sense. Um, there and our children aren't children anymore. Our children are adults, and that's still a fear. It's still a fear coming up with this
Yeah.
election cycle because depending on what your state is trying to write in legislation, we know it's a record year, just like last year was a record year on anti-trans and pro-trans legislation. But if we've got that much legislation going on, then you know it's impacting, and it's federal. Jenni pointed out in one of her TikToks this week. It's not just state. This is federal level bills that will affect the whole country, no matter where your kid is at. Why are our children suddenly going to become refugees because of who becomes president? They're American born citizens. They have every right as every single one of us. So why? Why is this a question? And so Jenni and I, we talk about politics. I know some people get really uncomfortable with politics, but we talk about politics because specifically in our states, we're both in red states. We both have state bills that are being passed that, granted, for me, my child, because he's an adult, a lot of them don't impact him. But that doesn't mean that they can't and that they won't. Because when you get something passed in one red state, the rest follow. And unfortunately, if a particular party gets into the presidency, this is a particular party that's talked about putting these kids in and internment camps. In the US, you're going to put people who are human beings, who have full citizenship, who have full rights. You determine that they don't, and you put them in internment camp. Anybody remember what happened in Germany and see any similarities? Why are we doing this again? Why are we supporting that? We should be want someone who wants to support everybody at whatever level they need, not equally, but equitably. Whatever rights, whatever care, whatever supports they need. And right now, the trans community needs a lot of support because they feel attacked everywhere. Everywhere. Um, and it's hard for Jenni and I not to get like emotionally, like really want to honestly rage because if it's happening to our adult children, I can't imagine what's going on to the 7-year-olds and the 10-year-olds and the 13-year-olds and those parents who are having to navigate schools that won't support their kids, schools that say you have to demand they be outed, that they have to call the parents and tell them that they want to change their name and their pronouns. And then you've got the misinformation, the disinformation that is, yeah, I can't hear you. Yeah, you may have to, I don't know, you may have to leave the studio and come back in to see if it will rework your mic because it doesn't say you're muted for me at all. Let me click on you and see if it changes. Okay. I feel like, all right, you're still muted. Unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Sorry,
There we go.
it says I'm maybe losing a little bit of internet connection, so that's could be happening. Sorry about that.
Okay. You're all right. You're all right. I can hear you now. But I mean, that
Okay.
is really the deal is that we are at this place where we have so much disinformation floating around. Like we talk about this before, but I know it's still being pumped out there that kids are going to school to have gender transitions. We in my county specifically, we share one school nurse across 5 elementary schools. Our teachers don't really get a surplus. They buy their own supplies. If I wanted to
Right.
give my child a Tylenol, they would have to call me to get permission
Right.
to give my kid a Tylenol. The school would, but somehow schools have a surgical setup, a plastic surgeon, an anesthesiologist, nurses, recovery nurses, and this child can have this surgery done and go home in the same day. That wouldn't happen. Even you don't go home after one of
Well, and
these
here's the thing.
surgeries.
I don't think people really believe that. I'm sure
I hope not.
there's like some minute small subset of people who absolutely believe anything you tell them, and I don't know what to do for people like that. But I don't think most people believe that. I think that they
I
just love
hope
to
not.
get riled up over it, that they just love another talking point. You know, I'll still even see things from people who are like, oh, there are litter boxes in classrooms for, kids who think they're cats. And it doesn't matter how many teachers come on and are like, that's completely untrue. We do have some kind of makeshift potty things or whatever for if there's a school lockdown, which obviously is its own terrible, terrible issue, but that's not happening. I don't know if some people are just so willing to believe anything you tell them because it helps them to, hate somebody, or it helps them to further discriminate. But that's that's insane. That's not even silly. That's not even funny. It's scary to think that people will just believe anything you tell them like that. That's wild. That doesn't make sense.
Right? Right? It is really wild. And I told Jenny, and if anybody saw it, I did post something out there earlier today that was kind of just directing everybody to tonight's event, and that this was kind of what we were going to talk about. And it's a 2-minute video that we want to share with y'all because I think it really kind of speaks to the moment and where we're at and the ease in which you can slip into supporting
Mm.
people even if you don't understand.
Mm.
So this is called Not Losing You. It is a 2-minute film. And yeah, I y'all just check it out.
So maybe I'll start a little bit softer. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine.
Dad?
Before you say anything, I just want to apologize for what I said this morning. I've been doing a lot of thinking. If you want to change your name, if you want to wear a dress.
It's a skirt, Dad.
Skirt. I don't know the kind of support you need, but let's get you some for all this transgender stuff.
Wait. Are you serious? Dad, what is this?
Oh, this is me supporting you. This is me saying I love you. This is me not losing you.
I love you, Dad.
Love you. Holly.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Okay, now that I'm crying. But it's that simple. It's that simple, whether you understand it or not. This dad was just flat out looking at what happens when we don't support our children. And exactly what he said, I don't want to lose you. Because we lose too many, way too many of the LGBTQ population, specifically the trans population. in adolescence because they're not being supported, whether that be at school, whether that be at the home, whether it be in both places. And that was kind of the aim of this show. This was the kind of the aim of Mama Bear and supporting your trans child, because we understand that the trans adolescent population are the highest on the homelessness. They are the highest on suicidal ideation. They are the highest to attempt to take their own lives. They are the highest with mental health issues. They are highest with substance abuse issues. And it could all be changed with one little word: support. Whether you get it or
Mm-hmm.
not, support. That's it. Yeah. I don't know if
I
you'd had
like
a
to
chance to watch that yet, Jenny.
I like to mention too that this we might not have because of when we were born. I mean, I guess we saw it some, especially you seem to have seen it a lot more. I did have parents that, my dad was kind of that don't ask, don't tell guy. I do remember him saying Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, when I was growing up, but he was never overtly like, I just remember those things a couple times because the don't ask, don't tell was kind of a thing whenever I was younger. We were hearing about it then. But I don't ever remember him saying overtly just hateful stuff like, oh, look at that, this, or it was like it just didn't really get brought up until maybe somewhere it was, it came in from the outside and then he might say something about it. My mom, on the other hand, has always been a very, love is love kind of person. I think, I don't know why then she just went on to be like super ultra conservative Baptist, but I always had that vibe from her. So I kind of knew. But we have the gay community started with this a long time ago and went through all of this. And now it's been pushed onto the trans community.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done this before as a society. And it's hard to look back and go, okay, we did it before and it took time and it took this and we finally got here, especially because the gay community is still under fire in their own way too. Don't get it twisted.
Yes.
Like they are still with some things like Project 2025 of losing their marital status, their right to marry. That is absolutely on the top, that's part of that agenda. But just because we've been there and we know we can go through it again doesn't mean we should. And in the meantime, lives are lost. And many people just in the LGBT community did not survive, that time period, those things, for a lot of reasons that we go into another episode, but they didn't survive that. And we need, we want your children, we want everybody's children to survive this growing pain, this time in history. We want them to survive. And anyone who, thinks there's something wrong with that, I don't know what to say. Like, are you okay? Are you okay that you don't want young people to survive? Is it so important that your idea of whatever sex and gender are, that those be followed? Is that so important that you might be willing to lose human lives over it? That doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me
Anyway.
either. It is and it does seem like, well, I mean, and we've talked about this before. We know why misinformation, disinformation starts. We know why the LGBT or the LGB community was targeted in the first place. It was because it was a way, if you gaslight people, you make people scared enough, it will push people to the polls. And so gay rights was something that they stirred the pot on in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and everybody's like, no, absolutely not. We can't have same-sex marriage. You can't have same-sex couples adopting. You can't have two moms or two dads on a birth certificate. There was all this pushback. And then by the mid 2000s, or well, not mid 2000s, but 2015, 2016, we kind of had solidified just about every single one of these into place at some level across the US. And now, because you can't inflame people with gay rights anymore, because everybody's like, we've learned to accept that. We've embraced that. Now comes the trans, because, oh, here's something we can scare people with. So you started to hear about drag queens. You started hearing about parents grooming their children. All of this crap that, quite frankly, it's crap. We have documentation of trans people back to the Copper Age, which is 3,000 years ago. If there's documentation of trans people existing 3,000 years ago, this is not new.
That's not
This is
new.
something that politicians are trying to tell you is brand new. And there's one particular candidate who's out there making up every ridiculous thing that he can to push more people to the polls and to tell you that trans people shouldn't exist.
And they're somehow going to take over something. It's really super silly. And that's, Project 2025 as an agenda is dangerous on so many levels. I mean, we do a breakdown, there's a lot of things wrong with that. But this is one where if you claim to, well, I had another gal who commented and she said, it's not fair that you lump all conservatives like this. It's not fair that you lump an entire political party like this, because I'm that political party and I don't have a problem with people gay, trans, or whatever. Cool story. I don't believe you, because you're putting people into power and you're voting in a way that contradicts what you say you care about. And if you're doing it because of taxes, nobody wants to pay taxes. Nobody wants to pay taxes. I pay a lot in taxes. I pay a lot. Nobody wants to not have money, but we're talking about human beings.
Right.
So you can't sit back and say, well, I don't agree with that. It's fine by me. I'm not that person. And then continue to do that. You can if it helps you sleep at night, but at some point you're going to have a reckoning with yourself and go, is that the truth of who I am? And as long as it doesn't affect them, they don't seem to care. But I guarantee you, my parents never thought that this was going to affect them. I, as this very left-leaning queer woman, never thought this was going to affect me. I didn't think this was coming down the pike. I thought I had a butch lesbian kid. I did not see this coming. I mean, looking back, a lot of things made sense. We talked about that before, but I didn't expect this. And when it does, it's almost embarrassing to admit that that's what it takes to make you go, holy crap. This entire community needs better advocacy and every single ally that it can get.
Well, I mean, I think I go back to this just dates me a little bit. My kids watch epic rap battles all the time, and so they've been watching them recently, and they're honestly watching a lot of the presidential ones from former campaigns and from the current campaign, because those are the ones that they really like. And always at the end, you have like Abe Lincoln or a former dead president come flying in, we the people, for the people, by the people. And every time I hear that, that's what I think. Why can't we just respect every human being in the US to make the choices of what's right for them? And I know because I was one of those who said, you don't get to have those rights. 22-year-old, 23-year-old me, don't tell me my kid is gay. Don't you dare say that. Not on my watch. Those were my words.
Yeah.
And luckily I unpacked that so that before my kid came out, my kid felt safe to come out. And so that I was fine, like, okay, I'll put you in this box. Let me tear off the box. We're good to go now. Do what you want. But that isn't as easy for some people as it is for others. I had been in a marriage that made it very easy, where I had been kind of told what to do and who to be. So myself, I had already burnt my own boxes. So when my kid came out, it was like, oh, I did the same thing. I'm sorry. Burn the box. We're done. Do what you want. And for the most part, it's been easy peasy after that. But it's not like that for every child. It's not like that within every family. And just because I accepted him didn't mean that my ex-husband did. He didn't tell us his father for 6 or 7 years because he knew his father's politics. He knew his father's religious ideologies. And he knew how his father had been every single day of his life until he walked out when he was 15. He knew. So if you already know what the people around you, how they feel, you've created an environment where they don't feel safe. Your own child doesn't feel safe to come out to you to say, I need help with this. I need support. And I'm thankful, I'm grateful that I had unpacked my bias. I had unpacked my discrimination and my crap beliefs so that when my kid came out, I could easily accept them. But being in the healthcare community, I was watching the pushback even within the healthcare space. I had teachers that I could go up to. This is before my child came out, that my child had already been looking at gender neutral chest reconstructions before they ever went into breast development. And I thought, and they didn't
Wow.
know, because if they had known, we might would have talked to the pediatrician. But because we were so blessed on my side of the family, he knew this was a probability. So he was already looking before that ever developed at how to remove it. So I had a
Wow.
teacher, human sexuality in nursing school, and I go up at the end of class and we're talking about gender identity that night. And I go up after class and I'm like, my 15-year-old is looking at gender neutral chest. And she just looked at me like, good luck with that. And I was like, okay, so you can teach it, but you still don't support that. And you're a nurse, which tells me you don't support your patients. Big, big problem, guys. And like that was in nursing school. If you can't even talk about bodily autonomy for the LGBT community in nursing school, where you know you're going to go to the floor and deal with patients,
Right.
where does the education come from? And we know this is not being taught in med school. Like they're beginning to do some shifts in this, but for the most part, these are left out of all the programs. And so then you have this wide range when a trans person goes in the hospital for anything, whether it's the ER, whether it's an urgent care, whether it's a regular doctor's visit, they have no idea what they're going to walk into and how they're going to
Right.
feel.
Yeah.
And not every
I
community
remember,
has a gender clinic, a gender safe clinic for them to go to.
no, by any stretch, no, by any stretch. I remember the first time my son injured himself, and it was just a simple ankle sprain, but we pulled up to the hospital, and all of a sudden it occurred to me, oh my God, we're about to go in here. Your healthcare card says this, your birth certificate says this, your ID says this. And, we had to sit outside of the hospital and have a conversation like, how do you want me to handle this? Do you want me to go in? Do you just want to go by this birth certificate name and like not even worry about it? Or do you want me to tell them you have a preferred name? I just want you to feel comfortable. And, it's a weird conversation because it shouldn't matter. It's an ankle. It's just an
Right?
ankle. So it shouldn't matter what I did or what, but just that fear that's in there about how am I going to be treated? How am I going to be perceived? Um, you can feel that. We all have experience being somewhere with someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't like us.
Right?
We know what that's like. We all know that kind of
And you're
vibe they give
uncomfortable.
off.
Like
And
you want to get out. Like it's just like, let
right,
me run from the room,
right.
please.
And it's one thing if it's, somebody that you can run from the room or somebody that you're like, I don't care what they think about me. But when you're going in there for medical care, like that's so important to feel safe, to just feel like, I don't have to worry about whether this person hates me or not.
Right? Are they going to be accepting or they're not going to be accepting? It
Am I going to
honestly, when
get
we're talking about
care? I
medical
should.
care, that shouldn't
It's a
matter. Like
huge power.
honestly,
It's a huge
oh, it's
power dynamic. That person has
yeah.
the ability to give you relief or keep you in pain. I mean, it's a very vulnerable state to be in.
And it's not even relief or pain because their intentions could be to bring more pain, depending on
Amen.
their beliefs. Their beliefs, like, well, you really
Right.
shouldn't, and I'm going to call you by your dead name. And I don't
Right.
think I really, because my kid luckily hadn't had that experience where you need to go into an emergency care kind of situation since he came out. So we've not had to deal with any of that. But watching some of the people within our trans community go in for simple procedures, this isn't even like anything to do with their gender identity. It would be like a gallbladder would go bad and they needed gallbladder surgery. And this range of reaction that they would get from different medical care teams, like whether it be oh, well, you're my first patient that's ever been that way. I'll try and do my best. But if I, misgender you, I'm sorry. To the next person being like, well, not until it's changed on your birth certificate, I don't have to honor it. To the next one being like, I will absolutely honor your preferred pronouns. But like the patient was having to explain this to every medical professional that came in. And number one, that puts them at unease because they have no idea what the reaction is going to come down with that. And then what kind of care are they going to get? And our thing is doctors take the Hippocratic Oath. Some nursing schools do the Hippocratic Oath. Some nursing schools do Florence Nightingale's oath. And that's the one my nursing school did, which was Florence Nightingale's. And that just says that you are going to treat everybody the way you would treat anybody. So in other words, and this is what I used to tell my cohort, they should be your grandmother, your sister, your brother, your kid, your aunt, your uncle. Like that's how every patient should be treated. And I had like pushback because we had, for instance, one person who came in from the local jail who was handcuffed, and because I had a guard outside the door, I had several people within my cohort like, I'm not working with them. I have no idea what they did. Your profession comes first, and your profession was to give health care, right? Like it was to give health care.
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't determine whether or not you're a straight person or if you're bi or if you're trans or gay, whatever it is, it shouldn't matter on what type of treatment you get and if you get treatment. And that's a bigger one. If you get treatment, we literally have states who are trying to prevent the trans population from having any treatment whatsoever. That's not supportive. It's the opposite of support. Complete opposite. And complete opposite of those oaths to do no harm to your patients.
Sorry.
And honestly, I feel like in a way that you're kind of. And please, if anybody in the audience is having a hard time understanding your child, A, please reach out to us. B, don't take this wrong. But I can't understand a parent who wouldn't try to understand their child for what's best for their child. It's not about you.
I
It's
don't know
about
if you
your
can hear
child.
me. I'm going to exit and
Yes.
come back in. Something's wrong.
Okay. But yeah, I just think that there's something to be said about. She's going to try and exit.
It seems like you can hear me, but I can't hear you. Will you go ahead and just remove me? Because I can't seem to
Yeah.
exit without like
Yeah,
ending the
let me
stream.
see.
I'm sorry. I'm so
No, you're right. Okay, so I moved her from the stage. I don't know if she can hear me, if she's going to try and come back in, or if she can, I don't even know if she can leave studio and try and do that. Yeah, there she did. She did. Okay. But yeah, I just think that when we talk about support, as parents, we're our kids' first line. We are front and center. That's where we're supposed to be. Even if you don't understand where your child is coming from, there should be that pause that says, this isn't about me, this is about my child and what my child needs. And obviously something's going on. Maybe I should sit down and try and listen. And really that's what this is all about. And if we cut off people before they have a chance to explain, and not explain who they are, but just to say, hey, I need these supports. If we're too busy cutting people off before they can ever express who they are, how are we the people, by the people, for the people, if we aren't doing that? Yeah, I think okay. Yay!
hooray. It never fails.
I mean, but that's what we do. We just roll with it. We roll with it.
We just roll with it. And that's a great kind of attitude to have about a lot of things that are going on. It's really hard to just roll with some things right now. I'm very irritated. I'm very scared. I'm very sad. I'm very upset. But, to some degree, you just got to roll with the punches and go, hey, we'll just keep going and pick it up. Anyway, keep going.
No, I mean, that's the truth of it. And honestly, like I had picked up from some of your TikToks that you are getting more anxious as we move toward the cycle. And so that was the reason why I was like, when you and I talked about it, I was like, yeah, I think you mentioned it at the end of last week. So I was like, yes, let's do the topic. Because I know that we aren't the only parents out here that are kind of like biting, like holding our breath. What is going to happen?
Yeah.
Because
It's
depending on
such a
who gets
different
in,
reality. Like it's
it's a
something that
big one.
most parents can't understand this. A lot of parents have a kid that, might get bullied for one reason or the other. And they'll go, oh, bullying's wrong and this is wrong. Now you need to take that and you need to expand it to a much, much larger national level. Because usually if your kid's being bullied, they're being bullied by somebody at school. Sometimes it's just students, sometimes it's students and teachers, and that's awful, and it does happen.
Yes.
Now imagine it's an entire political party. Now imagine it's every state leader that you have. And if you're not in a red state, maybe that's not as big an issue, but just trying to conceptualize it that way is really difficult for people. And it's sad because
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's like a lack of empathy there or what, but just try to imagine you get on any stinking platform and somebody's Facebook post is going to say something. Somebody's TikTok is going to say, it's everywhere. And it feels like just bullets flying at someone I love
Yep.
more than anything. And
I think when those people are ugly, like those are the people I remove. And I will be frank. Like I do, if I have somebody who is a connection, who's openly transphobic and put something out there that's like, I can't believe this, blah, 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 I'm not even going to have a conversation.
Right.
Delete. Because that's not good for my mental health. And I don't know that I can make an inroad with those people. I'm really just trying to help parents and anybody who's willing
to
listen. And that's something Jenni and I have talked about too. Like we've gotten to a point where we don't want to have conversations with people who have different opinions. And I get it that you might not understand, but be open to the fact that we all have different perspectives. Jenni and I grew up very similar, but at the same time had very different perspectives because she was very left leaning and I was very right leaning. I was not hardcore right, but right, very conservative, ultra conservative, Southern Free Will Baptist, locked in and loaded. I mean, it was bad. It was
rough.
I mean, when the honestly, when the LGBT, like when we tried to get gay rights going, I was the hardcore. Oh hell no, no, they shouldn't be able to adopt. That's evil. They can't marry. That's evil. Because everything stemmed from my religious upbringing, which was this is outside of what is acceptable, so it's evil. And I put that label on everything and everyone that didn't fit a certain box. Now I've had lots of years to unpack that, and thankfully so. But at the same time, I get where people could still be locked into that belief. And I'm not asking you to go out and hug a trans person. I'm not asking you to go to a drag show. I'm just asking you to think about who you're voting for. And yes, do they represent your rights? But what about all of your family's rights? Everybody within your family. What about everybody within your church or all of your colleagues in the office workplace? Your friends. You might have someone in your community or within your friendship range that is gay or is trans. Are you thinking about them too when you vote? Because again, when you go to the polls, when I go to the polls, I'm not thinking about just my rights. I am thinking we the people, for the people, by the people. Because I think all of us should have that opportunity. Every single person. Even if I don't agree with how they feel, I still want them to have that right. And that's who I elect. That's how I choose who I elect now.
The right to self-determination and autonomy, just to say what happens with your own body, how you show up for life. My feeling has always been whatever consenting adults do that doesn't harm other people is great. The issue that we're dealing with is that you've got an agenda coming from one side saying, but they are harming other people. And that's where we have to be dispelling those myths. I see these myths all the time. One piece of legislation that somebody brought up, I think it was in Delaware, but I might be wrong. It was something to outlaw transition surgeries for minors, because obviously those surgeries would be permanent. And what is about that is that's not happening. So it's understandable if your fear is, oh my gosh, people are performing these surgeries on children. That's, of course, that's a scary thought. Like, wait a second, hold on. What they're not considering is that there are already permanent surgeries being performed on children that are not transgender. Nobody's
Nope.
kid. I know we know so many parents of trans people. We know so many. And nobody is getting their 9-year-old and heading to the clinic to chop off body parts just because their kid came home and said, hey, I want to, I want to try on this name, or I want to wear this outfit, or I want to do this. We're not doing that. You know what is happening? Intersex children are operated on non-consensually to change their genitalia
At birth.
without any consent whatsoever. Circumcision, which is done without any consent whatsoever and has permanent lasting effects like loss of sensitivity, nerve damage. Those things are already being done to children and no one is saying a word about them. And now these people want you to be afraid that people like me and people like Amber are going to do that to our kids and open some sweeping door for everybody to be able to do that. And it's not happening. And if we don't know what we're up against and all we hear is that one thing, I mean, who wouldn't vote for that? Heck no.
Right.
If I didn't know any better, I'd be like, well, yeah, I don't perform surgeries on little kids. But
I'm
when
trying
you
to
know
think.
better,
Didn't you do a TikTok on something in Missouri?
yeah,
What
in
was the one?
Missouri,
What was the thing in Missouri that I hadn't heard of? Because I was
yeah,
like, when you put that out, I
I'd
was
have
like,
to look up
what?
I'd have to look up the House bill. I do have it saved to my phone, but I'm not sure. It's a Missouri House bill, and it would penalize anyone who supports or contributes to social transition. It would penalize them with a felony, and it would force them to register on the SEX offenders registry. Now, to support or contribute to social transition,
That would be us.
it's super vague language. First of all, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving them hormones, right? It doesn't mean that you're signing them up for surgeries. It could mean just calling them by that name or pronoun. That would especially apply to like teachers.
Yep.
It could mean, I provided a young person. My dog just grabbed my earbud. Hold on. I provided a young person with a piece of clothing for their gender. I
Right.
have an organization that has a clothes closet, and it is a gender affirming clothes closet so that young people, anybody really of any age in our community who maybe can't go get new clothes whenever they come out or kind of trying some things, that they have access to gender affirming clothing. It could be referring them to that. It could be just giving them a resource, be it leading them to a website, giving them a pamphlet, telling them of a queer affirming counselor. To felonize that activity and to take it to that next degree of having them on the SEX registry, offender registry rather, that is insane.
It's insane. It's insane.
That's crazy.
And that's pushback against us.
People
That's
don't
pushback. That's
that.
actually, that's meant to push back on people who support
100%.
their children.
Right. They're trying to get it at every single level. They're trying to cover all of their bases and make sure that these kids are just told, no, you're not. Nope. Try again. Anyway.
Right. Right. It's daunting for both of us. Like, I mean, to sit here and think we would be putting on a registry because we supported our kid.
Right.
Like, and so for the gender surgeries, guys, my kid's almost 27.
Yeah.
His first consult is next March.
Right.
At 27. Well, actually, he'll be 27 when we go in. He's 26 right now. But he'll be 27 when we go into that. 27. Not 5. Not 16. The overwhelming misinformation, disinformation out there is to scare people who don't have trans kids, who don't know trans people, to scare the hell out of you. Because if they scare the hell out of you, you will run to that ballot box and you will vote against them.
Right.
That's all this is.
Not happening.
And they're saying it's brand new. They're saying schools are doing it because it's the only way to inflame those people who aren't familiar with the trans community. It's the only way to inflame them to get upset enough to go to the polls.
Well, I think it's
and it's
another way
ridiculous.
to make people, have disdain for public education, because they absolutely want to attack public education too. So it's just another way to attack public education. I'm a former educator. I'm here to tell you we don't have any surgeons on site. It's just, that's not a thing. And please stop acting stupid. Stop acting dumb. Stop acting like you even think that's a possibility, because it's not. If it was, I would have signed up for a hysterectomy at my local public school years ago. We
talked about this a couple of episodes. I couldn't get a hysterectomy at 23 because they said I was too young. My insurance company said I was too young. So please stop saying that kids are having transgender surgeries. They're not. Enough.
They're not.
And it causes, they hear all of it, and that causes them more harm, because the more they hear politicians hate on their community, the more people talk about how they're going to vote against their community, the less and less they feel seen, the less they feel supported, and the more they go where? Here. And the more they go in here, and the less they speak, the more at risk they become.
For sure. And can you imagine the hopelessness and futility you would feel? Like, there's no future for me then. If this continues to happen, and every year it gets worse, or every year it gets more this way, where there's no future for me in which I am myself. And that, when you feel like there's no future for you,
it's much easier to think about taking a way out.
Well, then I'm not going to go forward. I mean,
right?
It makes sense. I lost a friend. I was listening to, there's another podcast, and I think I sent you something about it on TikTok, and it is Queer and Here, I think. And I'm already in love with this person already. They already did a show on, kind of keeping your cool through this election cycle. And I'd really love to speak with them. I'd love to have them on. But it was, I don't know where the hell I was going with that. Anyway, it's just been a really interesting journey to kind of watch. Other people are just getting more and more anxious. Oh, that's right. They were talking about how the suicidal tendencies are like at 72% higher for young people in red states. 72%? That's crazy.
Because they're looking at every level is against them. Their local, their district, their school board, their schools, their state, the government, the governor, like everybody at every level is like, no, this is bad. No. Anybody seen the ads? I know you have to have seen the ads. The numerous ads. What do you think that makes the trans community feel like when they see ads out there talking about their evil? And they should be exterminated. I know this for a fact because I got a lieutenant governor running for governor who made his name well known across the country because of this. Yes, because of his anti-trans rhetoric. Well, he's the one that was exposed on CNN a few weeks ago. He's not going to win. He is completely like, I think there's at least an 18 to 20% difference in the voting populace right now between those two. So I'm not really, he kind of stuck his foot in it a little, not a little bit, a lot. But this is the same party that you still had other state senators who weren't pushing back against his rhetoric. You didn't have the presidential candidate for his party wasn't pushing back. All of his colleagues, nobody was pushing back. You know what they were doing? Amplifying it.
Yeah.
And even though he's been buried in my state, they're still amplifying it. In fact, I know right now in Madison Square Garden, people are amplifying it right now. That transgender surgeries are happening in schools.
They're not happening in schools.
And they're not.
They're not. If you are a teacher, ally, create content about that. Dispel these myths.
Right.
If you work in a school, if you have children who go to public schools, dispel these myths. It should not be up to the transgender community to fight this fight.
They shouldn't educate.
Start war. It is up to us. We are safe. I am safe. I am not. As a parent of a trans person, I'm targeted to a degree, but since my child's an adult, I'm not targeted nearly as much as a parent of a child. that is the privilege that we have heard marginalized groups talk about for so long, that we have this privilege. And if we're not going to use it to help others, then what the hell is any of this for?
Right.
What is any of this for? You
It's
cannot tell me
ridiculous.
that you believe in some kind of higher power, higher purpose, higher goodness, and then not contribute to it. Because that's chaos theory in my world. If everything's just, well, just do whatever you want and whatever happens, happens, then okay, then you don't really believe in anything. And I mean, cool. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in the goodness of humanity. I believe that we have the ability to help each other and to make the world a better
Right.
place by loving on each other. And what else is this for? Nothing matters if we're all just here doing whatever we want and harming whoever we want because of our own fear. It just becomes pointless.
AP and I have another show that's on music, if y'all aren't familiar with it. But there was one of the lyrics of the songs that we did this past week the lyric was, our roots are made to be interwoven. Because we are all connected.
Yeah.
We are all, whether you want to admit it or own it, yes or no, we're all on the damn planet together. We all have to, if we want to make the world keep spinning in a better place, it takes all of us, not some of us, all of us working together, not chopping up our roots and tossing them to the side, but actually working together. And I thought that was a beautiful, which we were talking about politics, and I've had a whole week of talking about politics on every single one of my shows. So that one was about politics and just talking about us getting back to our roots. And we can't make change if we're constantly in disagreement. We have to be willing to communicate. We have to be willing to see other perspectives. And
just to connect to
it would be boring. It would be boring if we all thought the exact same way. If we were all the same person, and we aren't. That's obvious. But we should be willing to listen to different perspectives that are outside of our own.
Yeah.
And I guess that's really the theory of the show. Like,
right.
be willing to see people differently, even if they don't look like you.
Connecting with our shared humanity is really essential to our survival at this point. Because if it's not this community, it's going to be another one.
Yep.
And, we all at this point probably know, that the poem, I believe, was like written on the wall of Auschwitz. First they came for this group, then they came for this group, and then they came for this group. This is just the nature of bad people. They come, and I'm not saying that every single person within that political umbrella is a bad person, but you are believing things and listening to some very bad people with very bad intent. And not shutting them down means you're contributing to it. And they go after one thing or another, and then it becomes this group, and then it becomes this group. And they are really banking on you being afraid. And they are really banking on you hating who they hate. And you don't have to buy into that.
No,
we don't have to buy into that. We can say, I don't get it, but that's a human being, and I love and accept and honor them. Right. I don't get it. I'm not trans. I can't. How could I possibly get it? That would be like asking, my husband to get me. He just can't.
Right.
But that's okay. I can still, okay. Well, I mean, I can get the human experience, and that's all somebody's living is their own human experience.
Right.
It's been wonderful.
We should just support one another with where we're all out. Where is it?
And not doing
this
harm.
one. Easy. Yeah. No limits, people. No limits. Just why are we putting limits?
Yeah. Just love.
That's it. That's it.
The rest will figure itself out. It really will.
Right. And hopefully, hopefully this next cycle, some of the rhetoric will calm down.
But
I'm really hoping so.
I do want to end with this. It's very important that we don't just vote on November 4th and then go away. You have to vote all the time. All these things at state levels. The only reason I'm in a red state is because red people keep getting voted in. And the only reason these bills keep reaching the state level, even in blue states that are very, very harmful, somebody's writing them and people are voting for that somebody. And your local election is your most important election. You
Yep.
can skip the presidential election if you vote locally. You're better off. Now, I still think you should vote in the presidential election.
Right.
But if you had to choose between always voting presidential and never voting local, or always voting local and never voting presidential, you're better off always
Local.
voting, because those people make up your electoral college. Those
Yep.
people are doing everything at your state level. Everything begins with you locally. Please do not just walk away on November 5th, regardless of the outcome, and go, well, I did my duty every 4 years. You have to do your duty all the time. If it's a school bond issue for your local school district, if it's, a vote on whether or not to, make speeding tickets higher price, whatever the issue is, please vote on it. And if you don't understand it, if you don't know, every single person has a county Democratic Party board or a county Republican board. You have ones at state level. Call somebody. Sometimes these bills are difficult to understand because of the way they're written and the language that's in them. Somebody will explain it to you, and you decide how you want to vote on it. I vote at every single local election because they are going to know that I'm here. I lose. I'm on the losing team every single time. And you know why? Because it is more people who do not show up and go, maybe I'll lose, but you're going to know I'm here. You're going to know and every time we get more and more and more, they start to go, oh crap. If I don't act right, or I don't start coming across the aisle, they're going to vote me out because their numbers are rising. People get a lot more agreeable when they know that their future is in your hands, and their future is in our hands, but not if we don't show up. We're nothing if we don't show up. If we sit at home and go, well, I'm not going to vote for her because one time back in this time, she was a prosecutor. Cool. I guess, I don't know. That's just an emotion.
What does that do for your future? I guess my thing is with when people are apathetic to voting, my question is always, but what does that do for you going forward?
Right.
If you aren't heard, what does that do going forward?
Right. I mean,
and how many people are complacent and just sit by and go, this doesn't pertain to me. It'll be okay. And then you wonder why these things are going on. It's because
I wonder why this happened. Because you sat on your ass. You sat on your ass. And then people go, well, I shouldn't check off this box or that box. Nobody's going to check off every box that you have. No. Every human in this country has a list of boxes, and nobody gets 100% of them checked off. So quit being a spoiled child and accept that sometimes that's what we're dealing with. Look at the other one. Does he check off all your boxes? Do you think he's safe? You can't possibly think that. I'm not talking about the lesser of two evils. I'm talking participating in democracy, because every time we participate, it can get better. Right. As long as we stand out, as long as we step back, as long as we do not participate, we get whatever is handed to us.
Yep. And you got no choice. So, you get no choice in the matter. You don't get no voice in the matter. And that was the reason why, like earlier this last week, I was saying voice your vote, because speaking out about causes, that's the same thing. Your vote is the same thing.
Right.
As speaking out on a cause. You're just speaking out on a lot more at one time. Like check, state, local, district, federal.
Right. Every single one of them.
It matters.
And I know that sounds really rhetorical and really cliche. It's like people died for this. To understand the gravity of that, there's a lot more to it. We this country, it's got its problems. It's got a lot of historical problems. But if you think of where a lot of our ancestors came from, they came from a place that was under patriarchal rule, that was under a monarchy. And people died so that we didn't have to live like this. Women fought and died so that I could go cast my vote. So that my husband couldn't tell me what to do, how to vote, when to vote, that I couldn't vote. So I didn't have to just take whatever was given to me. That's big. I owe that to people. I owe it to people at Stonewall. I owe it to people who did not survive the AIDS crisis. I owe that vote to them.
It's just our owed duty to our country.
It is.
We live here. We might as well vote.
But God dang it, the only way to make it better is to participate in it.
You can't change the system by doing nothing.
Right.
You have to attempt.
You okay, baby? I got a coughing dog. Okay. Well, we've gone over time again anyway.
We have. That's the normal. And I'll leave you with this one little piece because we're talking about voting. Found out this little ditty that I didn't know till 2 days ago. And that's because complaints are coming in North Carolina at local election boards. Did you know that in North Carolina, it's completely legal for husbands and wives to go into the same voting booth and that they are calling couples up together and that people were literally watching and calling into election boards because husbands were pointing out to wives who to vote for. And it's completely legal. Let me tell you, if I was in my former marriage, now granted, we never walked into a polling booth. We voted at home. I always did by mail. Number one, I had small kids and like trying to make sure that I could get there and that kind of thing. Like it wasn't easy. So I've always voted early. I've always voted by mail every single flipping election. But I'll be John Brown if somebody was going to tell me how to vote. And to find out that in this state, in North Carolina, it is still legal to do that. It takes me back to the fact that there's a certain party that wants to do away with no-fault divorces. And what happens to women in domestic violence situations? They can't leave. Now they're being told how to vote
You want to know how
in the
that's
South.
That's
Only in
remedy
the
Amber's local elections. That's the
right,
remedy is
right.
for local elections.
Who you vote
Holy
for? Who
crap.
goes in? Right. Like I said that AP
Holy,
and AP was like,
I've never even heard of that.
what? I was like, yeah, they're
No.
going in as couples. I cannot. And like even
Stop.
at the local election board, even the people were putting out it should be one person per poll booth. But because this law is still on our books, they can absolutely call Mr. and Mrs. So and so into the
Ugh,
booth to vote
gross.
together. And I'm just like,
Gross.
here we are. It's the South. It's the South, people. I don't
Gross.
want to be that
Sorry.
ugly, but it's old, generational.
I'm sure they'd do it here if they could. Please, are you kidding? Oklahoma? Yeah, 100%.
Right, yeah.
Gross.
Like, don't give Oklahoma any ideas. So that being said, we are over time. And yeah, we will have Dr. Diana. I had Dr. Diana actually, and Keith Connors and Jeffrey, from what I can see in the comments. And we were just kind of going on so much, I didn't want to interrupt that with hellos this evening. Thank you guys for being here. Dr. Diana will be on with us next week to talk about some upcoming publications that she's got
Always
going
love
on.
a Dr. Diana show.
Yes, right. And and Dr. Diana, if you're still listening, I will get back with you. I have some procedures very early tomorrow morning. That when we get off here, I'm starting my prep to go under surgery first thing in the morning. So I will be getting up with you probably on Tuesday, Monday night, Tuesday. But you will be on next week, no worries. So y'all come back next week so that Dr. Diana Sorrentino will be our guest again. I will probably put that information out on Tuesday unless I'm with it enough tomorrow evening, but I'm not exactly sure how with it I'll be. It's supposed to be light anesthesia, but we'll find out. And I'm probably not sleeping tonight either. So I'm probably going to come home after a very early procedure and crash till mid-afternoon.
So stay in touch with
Whatever.
me. Let me know how it goes.
I will. All right,
Love you.
guys. Love you. Thank y'all for joining us. We will see you again next week.
Take care of each other.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.
Is it going to end?
I don't know.